Hi, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. In this video, I'm going to continue my discussion of Ayn Rand's Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, and I want to make some clarifications in her assessment. This is going to be 2.2 in the discussion and also in the notes. If you want to follow along in the notes and see what I'm using to direct my lecture, feel free to download the notes. Basically, all you have to do is just click the banner that'll pop up, or click the the link in the description field. It'll take you to the PDF. As I continue the lectures, the PDF will grow larger until I complete the analysis of Ayn Rand's Objectivist Epistemology. I think in this section of Chapter 2, a lot of the confusions might be clarified. Some of the main confusions that I think people are having in an understanding of Rand is sort of her realist stance, if you will, right? What is her relationship, what is her belief with respect to perceptual objects, right? Are perceptual objects, or is our awareness of perceptual objects needed, right? What is the relationship between perceptual objects and sort of the formation of units and so on? A lot of these things she clarifies in this section of the analysis. So hopefully after my discussion of this section 2.2 in her analysis, hopefully a lot of the confusion will be clarified. So this again is 2.2, and we will begin the discussion of Rand's Objectivist Epistemology. So this is alright, and this is chapter 2.2. Alright, 2.2 in the notes. Again, just click the link and you can download the notes if you want. So we're going to begin by discussing the conceptual range, right? She introduces this idea of the conceptual range, and it's important to understand what she means by the conceptual range, the purpose of the conceptual range in her analysis, and also how the conceptual range factors into this foundational account of her epistemology, right? The conceptual range for Rand has extreme importance, extreme significance in the idea to form concepts, hence conceptual range, and thereby that ability of understanding what the conceptual range is, what it's composed of, will help in us articulating her epistemology, right? So let's look at this idea of conceptual range. Alright, so in the conceptual range is comprised of knowledge and the power of abstraction, right? So you need two things to discuss a conceptual range according to Rand. Is we need to have an articulation of knowledge, and we have to have an articulation of the ability to abstract, right? So it's composed of, roughly speaking, knowledge and abstraction. Okay, so the conceptual range is composed of knowledge and abstraction for Rand. What we want to do now is she attempts to try and sort of chronologically almost, or developmentally would be better, not chronologically, but developmentally, talk about the progression from a very rudimentary conceptual range, right, and the foundations with which our conceptual range is grounded, and the development from that very rudimentary conceptual formation to a very, very complex conceptual formation. So epistemologically, what she's attempting to do is to talk about sort of the transition from a very, very simple rudimentary conceptual ability to a very, very complex conceptual ability, and she does that descriptively in her account of the conceptual range. So when we talk about a very limited conceptual range, she identifies this limited conceptual range by the phrase pictorial representation, right? So we're talking about differences in conceptual we can look at, and obviously both of these accounts will speak to knowledge and abstraction. The first being pictorial representation. Okay, so pictorial representation. A pictorial representation is a limited, right? A limited conceptual range, right? Limited. I'll explain this in a second. I'll give examples to clarify this, right? A pictorial representation is a limited, has a very limited conceptual range. It is a representation, pictorial representations is a representation of simple abstraction, right? A very simple abstraction, right? So it represents right? So pictorial representation has a very limited conceptual range, and it represents simple abstraction. What do we mean by this? Well, the next thing to recognize when we're talking about pictorial representation is that the pictorial representation, the existence of this representation exists as and at the perceptual level, right? This pictorial representation, it exists at the it exists at the perceptual level. Now that we have it listed, let me make sense of what this exactly means, right? So the question is, okay, you threw a whole bunch of stuff on the board, but what does that mean? What does it mean